Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Web3 Business Podcast. I've got Marshall here today, who is the founder of the Historia blockchain, and we're going to deep dive a little bit into the project because there's been some exciting updates, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about them. So, Marshall, maybe we can start with a quick introduction about yourself and about Historia, and then we deep dive into the updates.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Me personally, I'm unfortunately not a young man anymore, and so I've been involved in computers since I was a teenager, over 30 years and that sort of thing. I grew up in the Dallas area and right north of Dallas, actually, and I was a part of the computer security community starting when I was 16. I went through the process of going to college, becoming a developer, and that sort of thing. And ultimately, I became a computer security consultant. I run a business as a computer security consultant. And from there, I got involved in blockchain and Bitcoin around 2012, 2013. And I was actually mining Bitcoin with GPUs out of my house. So that's how long I've been in this space. About 2017, I really wanted to design my own blockchain and work on that. And that's when I came up with the idea of Historia. The idea ultimately, at the time, and Rob, you will remember, it was kind of hard to describe what it was. We kind of compared it to Wikipedia as a repository of information, but that's really not what it is. So we're not trying to be a comprehensive repository, but rather we're trying to focus on specific and verifiable data, as well as some other aspects. So what it's not like Wikipedia. What it is, and this is the 30-second elevator pitch that I've come up with recently, and I kind of thank Twitter and Elon Musk for this, but Historia is a community notes, fact-checking, and an archive.org to ensure a reliable information going into the ecosystem.
It's extremely interesting that we've came to this point because I know you have been working on this project for a long time, and you always followed the same vision. It was always very clear for everybody involved that your vision was to have a blockchain which is recording historic facts. And you work towards a product, and now indeed with the Twitter community notes, it kind of came to this type of kind of conclusion or update, I guess. So I'm looking forward also about the current let's say update of Historia. What's new? What's different? What can we? I think it's launched last week, correct?
So before we get into the actual updates, one thing I would like to actually kind of touch on is kind of some weaknesses of the Community Notes platform, as well as like archive.org, because I think that's a good starting point ultimately. So Community Notes, how it works for people that are not familiar with it, is that there might be a controversial tweet that actually gets released, and that somebody posts or whatnot. Community Notes gets tagged in that, and when it's tagged, then it goes up to the Community Notes Twitter. I don't know, I'm not part of Community Notes, so I don't know exactly how it works on the back end, but it gets submitted to the Community Notes Twitter, and then basically people research the topic to determine the veracity of the claims being made in the tweet itself. Then they vote on that and release a statement saying, yes, this is accurate, or no, there's more context that is needed to provide for the accuracy of the tweet. Also, Community Notes is not decentralized. So if Twitter goes down, which, a lot of people want to say that it's going to go bankrupt any day now, I don't necessarily believe that, but there is a possibility that it does go away one day. All of that information will be gone. Everybody likes to say that the internet is forever and that nothing is forgotten. But again, I grew up in a time when the internet was just on the edge of beginning. As a teenager, my first internet connection actually didn't have access to the World Wide Web. It existed, but it really did not, it was hard to use and whatnot. Most all of that information from the beginning of the internet is gone. You'll never find it again. All the companies that were using, designing these products are gone, with exception of like Yahoo or something along those lines. But it's radically changed. So there are weaknesses within the community notes system because it's centralized. It's not open source. It is, that information can go away. And then as well as archive.org or archive.ph. So how that works is somebody can go in and submit a URL to archive in its original state. So after it gets submitted, basically what happens is they crawl the web page and put it into a database for anybody to verify the content, as it was originally put into place. The problem with that, again, though, is decentralization. It is not decentralized. There is no permanence of information on that. And really, anybody can submit anything that they want, but they don't actually, have any sort of verification of the accuracy of the information. So those are kind of the weaknesses that I see. And that's how, using Historia, we're kind of changing that model to allow for, one, it's open source, so anybody can write the code. They can see how the voting mechanism works if you look at the code or just look at the documentation. And on top of that, it's permanent. As long as the Historia network runs, as long as someone is running it in the world, it will always exist. And so I think that's how we are changing the game here, concerning like the accuracy of information. Concerning the updates, what's really interesting about the new updates and where we're going with this is, I won't say we relaunched last week, but there was a fork in the network. And this was designed on purpose to further upgrade the network to support what we're doing. The network ultimately, it was running, but it wasn't perfect in my original vision. And so to upgrade the network, some of the things we did was increase the rewards for the actual system of voting and that sort of thing. But the really exciting part about the upgrades is that we're now capable of handling audio, video, PDF documents, this sort of thing. And why that I think that is important is because previously we could only enter in text data in an HTML format. And while that is good, there's impact that is missing. And when you're talking about video, there's some historical moments that, or current events that are happening right now that the video will provide much more impact than a million words on a written page. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see this stuff happen. The websites have been updated or will shortly. We're coming out of beta and we're really doing a push now to get this thing rolling.
Yeah, for sure. I have quite a lot of questions. First one, maybe regarding the last thing you mentioned, you want to get this thing rolling. What kind of people are you trying to attract? Are you trying to attract kind of the voters, people running a node? What are your kind of the goals for the next few months?
Yeah, so Historia runs on a master node system. It was originally a fork of the Dash code base. So one, we need more master nodes. I mean, that if somebody is technically inclined and has the skill set, we need more master nodes to decentralize that data storage layer further. And so that's a big part. If you run a master node, it does pay you rewards from the block release itself. And so that is a very important part. The voters, master node owners can also vote, but then there's something else called a voter node. That voter node is just as important. It doesn't cost nearly as much as a master node. It doesn't need to run 24 hours a day like a master node actually needs to run. And ultimately, the voters are going to control the direction of the network. The developers behind it, including myself, we don't have any control over what happens once the voters take over. And I think that's the democratic way of handling things when it comes to this. Ultimately, the voters as well as the master nodes, we need to start putting in content. There is some content right there right now. Our last record was put in maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was just talking about the Bitcoin ETF was actually being released. how that actually occurs is we take an archive of a web page similar to archive.org, and that's on the Historia network. It's been voted. It's not complete right now. It's not locked in because it's still in the voting cycle, but that will be locked in. And we thought that was a historic moment in Bitcoin's history because, people have been working on this for 10 years to get an ETF passed.
Right. So from my understanding, when it comes to voting, is it you're voting if a certain event is true or not, right? But are you also voting if this is a fact that should be recorded? Because you mentioned it's a historic moment, but can it also be debated, okay, this might not be an historic moment, we don't want to record it in the Historia blockchain? Is that part of it?
So there's actually a couple of different parts to this. It could be like a community note system where people are voting on the accuracy of the actual document or information being put in, or it could be something that somebody submits because it furthers humanity's goal on the evolution of civilization. It's some piece of information that is necessary for humanity to maintain over the course of hundreds of years throughout the course of the civilization's evolution. So for example, and while this isn't possible right now, we think about it in this sense. Wikipedia, the English version of Wikipedia compressed, is I think about 60 gigabytes. If we wanted to, and if the masternodes and the voters agree, we could actually take that entire document dump and embed it into the Historia blockchain.
60 gigabytes for okay.
Yeah. So it's both the concept of, is it accurate? Is the information accurate that we're putting in, or the voters are putting in, or the content submitters are putting in, as well as is this a good thing to have in an unaltered manner?
Okay, and maybe we can also kind of touch on the tokenomics here, right? What are the rewards if you run a node, if you run a master node, a voting node?
Sure. So the masternode owners, it's 50% of the block reward at this point. The total amount of coins out there right now is, I think, about 5 million. There'll be another 10 million that is released approximately over the next 100 years or so. And so the masternodes get 50% of the actual block reward. And that depends on how many masternodes. It doesn't mean every block reward will get 50% or every masternode will get every 50% block. But that's kind of how it works. So if there's, 1,000 masternodes, then you could probably expect to get, let's say, 100 coins a month or something along those lines. It just kind of depends about how many masternodes there are and that sort of thing. Concerning the voter nodes, there is no reward for being a voter. Besides, if you submit content, and that content is deemed useful to the network by the voters themselves, you can receive a reward for submitting that content if it is passed and approved.
Right. Okay, understood. And what about, let's say, the buying pressure, right? So the long-term value of the Historia token.
Yep.
How is that arranged?
Yeah, so you got to think about it in the sense of, if we are going down this path and people are, continue to submit content, they have to actually buy the coins to submit content. This is kind of like an anti-spam mechanism, that we only want information that people deem necessary to be recorded in the Historia blockchain. So think about Twitter. I think I read recently that they're doing about 100,000 tweets per minute or so. A lot of that is just noise and spam and stuff that doesn't matter whatsoever. So there is a required fee that gets submitted to the Historia blockchain on submission, and that is just kind of an anti-spam mechanism.
Okay. And if you so the Dash blockchain, I'm not sure how many of our viewers still remember that blockchain.
Yeah, it's an old one.
Yeah, it's a proof of stake. Was it one of the first proof of stake blockchains?
It's actually a proof of work blockchain. It is not a proof of stake blockchain, but they kind of say it's a hybrid. And why they say that is because there is things like master nodes, but ultimately it's running a hashing algorithm, just like Bitcoin is running a hashing algorithm. You can mine it on your GPU in the same way that Historia, we specifically designed ours to be GPU dependent, and because we don't want like ASIC chips and that sort of thing to take all the rewards. So if somebody doesn't have enough money, they can to run like a voting node or to submit articles, they can add GPU power to the network and get rewards that way, in the same way that you would mine any other coin.
Okay, understood. And are there any plans in the future to have other utilities for the Historia token? Because I can also imagine, right, this is also valuable for consumers or for other, maybe either businesses that want to access this. Do they have to use the token in order to access the information or to connect to it through an API? Is there any future plans that could increase the value of the token?
Yeah, I won't say that there's any plans in place, for example, to access the information, because we're very much about open information where everybody can access that information. However, there are plans in the sense of while it doesn't exist yet, one of the things that we could do for the actual Historia.network website, which interfaces with the actual blockchain, is that allow individuals to advertise. And they would when they advertise, they would actually have to use the Historia network token to purchase the advertisement. So there could be a situation there in which that there's pressure on the network itself and on the price, because of the number of hits that we are getting to the centralized Historia network website. Having said that, and it's something that I do want to bring up, because if you have any centralization in a decentralized product, that's the weakest link of the system. We've always said to ourselves and internally to the development team, if we don't get banned from certain countries, we're not doing a good enough job. And I really hold that and take that to heart, because I think it's an important thing to point out that there's governments all around the world that if this gets big, they're not going to like the information being shared because they can't control it. And that is a promise that, or a hope, I should say, that if we're not doing a good enough job, we're not getting banned. So I'm kind of excited to get banned from certain countries. Now, having said that, there is a decentralized web app that we have designed that basically matches the centralized Historia network website. It has all the same functionality. You can vote, you can submit content, you can do all of the things that you can do on the centralized version. And the only difference is that you're not going to see comments from other users that are not submitted through the blockchain itself.
Okay, that's interesting. So for the viewers out there, if you want to support free information, do buy the Historia coin. You're supporting this project, independent project. And I also think that, so what you're saying in terms of, banning from other countries, right? Is this, obviously it's a decentralized platform, so it's up to the voting nodes in the end what information is allowed. But for example, I'm just saying information coming from WikiLeaks or information that might need censorship because of, national interests, that is totally, there is no censorship on Historia, is that correct?
Well, I can't say that there's no censorship, because there's a lot of people out there that would like to submit illegal content. For example, we take a hard line about like pornography. There's no reason that on our chain that there should be pornography. That's not something that is historic in nature in general. And so it's something that we kind of look down upon. Having said that, anybody can submit anything that they ultimately want. It just will not make it to the main centralized network, the Historia.network website, because we have to abide by certain rules within. We're based out of the U.S., so there's certain things that we must do. Having said that, it would still get pushed all the way across the network, including to the decentralized version. If people find that to be good information to have that is not on the main network website, then they can vote the way that they choose to vote.
Understood. That is not under your direct control, obviously.
Correct.
Unless it's published on the Web 2 part. That is definitely interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are the updates are coming after this last one? What do you have planned?
Yeah, the next step really for the Historia network is we have to get mobile wallets involved. The idea behind this is to put this on as many platforms as possible. So mobile devices is a big key to that. The mobile wallets, of course, you can store your coins in a mobile wallet. But as well, when we implement the mobile wallet solutions, what we want to do is allow the individuals to actually view the information from the blockchain on the mobile wallets themselves. There is potential that we can, actually submit through the mobile wallet, and that's an ultimate goal, but that's probably a little bit further down the line. And why that is because there is some technical issues about how to submit through the decentralized network, and ultimately, from that perspective, if you're going to try to submit through a mobile device, you're still going to have to hit a centralized server somewhere. So mobile, that's a big thing. That's a huge thing. We understand that it's been asked for by our community, and I understand why. Ultimately the technical hurdles for some of the mobile development is immense at this point. But it's a slow burn process. I've been working on this project for 5-6 years of my life. I've never gotten paid for this project. I've never sold any of the coins that I ever mined for this project. So I think eventually we'll get there. It's just going to be a long road, as it has been.
Yeah, and I'm guessing also it depends on the support for mobile devices for dApps and Web3 applications, how that will
right.
Yeah.
And also you have to think about it in the sense of like Apple is very I don't know, anti-free speech, if you want to say that. That might be a little bit extreme, but ultimately, they used to ban Bitcoin wallets back in the day. I remember when that was occurring. So they might see what we're doing with the freedom of information that we're trying to push, and say somebody, the next WikiLeaks comes along and pushes it to the blockchain. They might not like that. And that's ever right to prevent, our app being on their app store. There are obviously other ways to sideload applications on iOS and Android to still provide for a mobile wallet.
Right. Yeah. That there's some extra steps for the end users involved there.
Correct.
And of course, you want the mass adoption, so you want also those. Yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, we're not in control of what Apple approves and denies.
Yeah. And do you see any integrations with AI in the future of Historia?
That's actually really a good question, because what I will say is yes, definitely. Not only, there's different objects, as I've talked about, in the Historia network that can be submitted from HTML files where people actually can write their own articles, like a news story or something that they specifically want to write, or they can import a web page that is off-site somewhere, or they can submit things like audio, video, documents, and that sort of thing. We can definitely envision like integration with the different AI platforms, ChatGPT, and whatnot, to actually help the users write documents and write this stuff. There is a problem though with ChatGPT, and this is why I'm glad that you brought it up. I've personally used it enough to know that how it works based off the large language models, it depends on what question that you are asking to determine the answer. ChatGPT, as good as it might be, gets things wrong all of the time. And so if you think about the future, where we're heading towards like a artificial general intelligence that is the next level beyond something like ChatGPT, the problem then becomes, does that artificial general intelligence have its own narrative and its own motives with regards to producing content that suits whoever owns it, right? If that's, pressure from the US government, if that's pressure from the Chinese government for them to actually write a certain document a certain way or purvey certain information a certain way, we think that that is a threat to not only like the historic records in general, but all of humankind, right? Because you're getting to the point where it's some, I don't know what you want to call it, a dystopian novel at that point, where everybody relies on a certain technology like AI, and that AI is being trained on certain data models that are wrong. A perfect example to this is I recently saw an infographic on Twitter, and it was that, let me see if I can recall it correctly. It was that in 1913, Hitler, Stalin, Tolsky, and I think it was Einstein, it might have been somebody else, all lived in Vienna, Austria, in 1913. And so I'd never heard this from a historical standpoint. I was like, that can't be true. And so I asked ChatGPT, is it true that, these historic figures all lived in Vienna at the same time? And ChatGPT basically told me no, that it couldn't have happened, that Tolsky and Stalin actually wouldn't have been in the same groups at the time, nor is there any evidence that Stalin was in Vienna at the time. The problem with that is I was thinking to myself, I'm curious now if that's accurate. And ultimately, there is numerous articles written by well-named, sourced journalists and whatnot, including the BBC, that says, in fact, this was true, that they all lived in Vienna at the same time. And not only that, they lived within a mile of each other. So it's kind of an interesting scenario where we're getting into this AI situation where people are going to rely on it more and more in the future, and it's going to be a progenitor of false information within itself, just due to what it is trained on, the models that it's trained on. So how do you protect the historical record, the current events or future history, as I would like to call it, from a all-encompassing AI that controls everybody's lives or pushes a certain narrative? Well, the only way you can do that from a super intelligent perspective, a super intelligent program perspective, is you have to have something called wisdom of the masses, which is the concept which Historia is based off of. It's the community note system. It's everybody's voting on the accuracy of something. And so if you have something that is, let's say, 100 years in the future, where AGI has now, is prevalent within all society, it's on every phone and whatnot, and it is telling you something that you're curious about if it was true or not, it might tell you the wrong answer, and then we can go back and to Historia, or the users could go back to Historia and say, well, at the time, the voters said this is accurate. So why is the voters from 100 years ago on the Historia network saying this is accurate, this did happen, but the AGI is saying, no, that never happened?
Yeah, that is very, very interesting indeed. So we're running almost at the end here, Marshall. I've got one final but very important question for our viewers, which is, you as a project founder, with tons of experience, right? You have been working on this for years now. What do you have any recommendations for entrepreneurs and founders that want to start their own Web3 project? And what do you want to kind of share with them? Any tips, recommendations to that audience?
Persevere. Blockchain is a hard technology to learn, much less master. When we got started was during 2017, during the ICO craze. And because I am a U.S. citizen and because a lot of the team was U.S. citizens, I saw the future in which the Security Exchange Commission was going to crack down on the ICO craze. They have since sued a lot of these companies out of existence. Even Dash, which is a open source foundation, not even a company, is under threat from the SEC at this point. We did not take any sort of funds. We did not raise funds. Everything that has been done over the course of the past 6 years has come out of my own pocket or my own time. I calculated the time between me and the other developers that we have spent, and if I was charging at my computer security company, this is millions of dollars of development time at this point. And so what I would say is persevere, continue on. Don't stop because you're out of money. Don't stop because of anything. And you have to do it that way. You have to think about it that way. Otherwise, when the money runs out, your vision dies. And if you're only in this for the money, like, you're not going to be successful. You have to be in it to change the direction of our world as a whole. And that's what I would recommend to anybody in the future, much less anybody that's getting into blockchain.
Wow, I love that statement. It's incredible. I think this is indeed, 100% to use this new technology as an opportunity to make your vision into reality, and persevere. Very, very good message. Thank you so much, Marshall. I highly appreciate it, and thank you everybody for watching. Bye bye.
Pleasure.